Washington Commanders corrected a legendary error. A new update on Dan Snyder. I promise, guys, it's going to be a quick update on Dan Snyder's situation. And we wrap our pre-training camp 53-man roster projections with the defense. All of that on this edition of the Locked On Commanders podcast.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Locked On Commanders is free and available on all platforms, including now on YouTube and the WUSA 9 Plus app. WUSA 9, your CBS affiliate in Washington, D.C., has a new streaming app that is a game changer for local news and sports in the DMV. Download the WUSA 9 Plus app now from your Roku or Amazon Fire Stick. We thank you for making us your first listener, your first view of the day. I'm David Harrison, a writer covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. And my partner and co-host is Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst show, which you can find on the Team 980 Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern time or anytime, along with this show on the Audacy app. You can also find us on Twitter at DHarrison82, at WrestleMania621, and at LO Commanders.
All right, David, thank you. And once again, we thank you, Commanders fans, for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen or your first view of the day, especially if you're watching on YouTube. We'll get to Dan Snyder in just a moment or two, and it'll be a brief update like David mentioned. But David, one update that does deserve a little bit more of our time is something we focused on our last episode of the Locked On Commanders podcast, which was the Commanders putting out a vote for the top 90. And remember, we talked about Trent Williams not being on that particular list and the controversy that ensued. Well, almost as soon as we put that episode to bed, it debuted, and right after 10 o'clock Monday morning Eastern time, the Commanders updated the list. They added Trent Williams, surprise, and Robert Griffin III, the ESPN analyst, to the list, to the other 15 names of which they want you to choose 10 of at commandlegacy.com. I ask you, is this too little, too late, or is this just an honest mistake and we just move on?
I don't think it's an honest mistake. I think that, someone in the organization, I'm not going to predict a name, but, someone in the organization knew what they were doing, leaving Trent Williams off the list. And, they got called out for it. And that's the power of social media and the power of connectivity and all this other stuff. And, I will applaud them, because a lot of franchises, and they could have done it the same. Honestly, I really didn't expect them to alter the ballot and change it, because I don't want to stir up a whole other pot, but people have already been voting, right? So like Trent Williams and RG3 are now behind the power curve because of that. But you also don't want to tell the people who already voted, like, hey, your votes no longer count, so do it again. Like, you don't want to do that either. So, look, I think what it shows is that the reasoning behind Trent Williams specifically being left off the list is what we thought it was, so to speak. And then they added RG3 because they basically looked at it and said, listen, RG3, great couple of years for the franchise. If we add Trent Williams, the next thing is going to be people saying, oh, well, you only left RG3 off the list because you don't like him either. And I didn't see a whole lot of outcry about RG3. We didn't talk about RG3, but, probably somebody said something. I won't go too little too late, because another kind of subset of this, and I feel like if we're going to, I don't think we really nitpick, but I do think we take some of like the smaller infractions and they kind of just add to this molehill that's become a mountain now. So if we're going to do that, I want to go on the other side too. I actually saw a follow-on tweet from an overseas fan of the franchise who said, listen, you require a zip code to vote. I don't have a zip code because I'm not American, so we don't have American zip codes. And fairly shortly after that, the Washington Commanders account, social media manager, whoever was on the Twitter thumbs that day, actually tweeted out, hey, we've actually removed that now. So now everybody can vote, even if you don't have a zip code. So I actually do applaud the franchise, because they're listening, they're taking action. And I think that that's a good step in the right direction.
It's a good point, and I did see that as well, although I didn't pay – I saw the part of it, and I didn't pay attention to the rest, so I'm glad you saw the whole thing, because it's interesting, because it does, to your point, point out that, all right, that, they're making mistakes, or things are not perfect, let's put it that way, yet
Right.
they're willing to correct their mistakes and admit their fault or change things to make it better. The team did tweet out on Monday morning. Again, here's how they worded it. Again, saying, we want you to help select us, the next 10 players on our 90 greatest list. Part of the tweet said, your feedback over the past 48 hours has been heard, and we appreciate your passion. So then they updated the list below. That's basically saying, listen, we heard you guys all going crazy. We heard you complain. That's what we equate to passion, and away we go. We're not going to exactly admit a mistake. We're just going to just kind of say we're updating the list,
Right.
So, I mean, listen, all in all, I guess, your point, I didn't think about this. The people that already voted, one time now, I guess they can go back and vote again, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
But the people that already voted on the original 15 names, they kind of get screwed a little bit because, to your point, Trent Williams and Robert wasn't on there. I will add this. Robert Griffin III, I covered both of these guys from the minute they walked in the door, and very, very, very closely, as you would imagine, from my days on the beat. Robert had an amazing 2012 season, I should say. 2013, 2014, 2015 was anything but. It was very rocky. So when I look at it, this is just me, but I think this speaks for most. One great year, one magical year, and it wasn't perfect. It was a rookie season for a quarterback, should not automatically put you on a list of the 90 greatest or the whatever greatest.
Right.
But in this organization, I think what they were trying to do, David, I don't know this for sure. I think what they were trying to say is, hey, if we just put Trent Williams as an addition on the list, that's going to look like we were just simply responding to criticism and like we screwed up. At least by saying, hey, let's put Robert on. We're putting a popular, in still some pockets, name, and we're saying, hey, not only did we not put got this guy too, So I don't know. I mean, maybe this is just a matter of semantics and politics, and maybe it's not that big of a deal in the end.
I mean, honestly, if the team, like a team in this situation, when you're doing something like this, it's better to kind of overcorrect than it is to undercorrect. And again, if you add Trent Williams, like, well, RG3 did have that good season and a half ish. Like, I mean, there was a period of time where, I mean, the burgundy and gold was about to dominate the NFL. Like watching Robert Griffin III quarterback this team, you really thought this team had something there, and they were going to kind of become one of these teams that takes over the NFL. And then injuries happened, and then the rest of the story just kind of unfolds from there. So that's unfortunate, but I think it's better, honestly, in this situation to kind of overcorrect. Like if you're the Washington Commanders, you would rather get criticized for what you put that guy on the list, he doesn't deserve to be there, than leaving a guy off who very clearly should be nominated for this list. But I'll be very surprised if RG3 makes it. But Trent Williams, even without the head start, like he should absolutely make this list.
Good point. Absolutely good point. All right, here's the Dan Snyder news. We're not going to do a lot of reaction to it because we know you guys are sick of it, but we pass it along. This via John Keim of ESPN. From the House Oversight Committee to Dan Snyder's attorney, a statement, quote, the committee accepts your offer for Mr. Snyder to testify on the subjects under investigation by the committee on July 28th. We will proceed with a subpoena in place to ensure that Mr. Snyder's testimony will be full and complete. So if Dan was trying to evade the subpoena and the serving of it, the House committee says, not so fast, my friend. And we'll see what happens, out of this. I mean, I don't know what else they can force Dan to do and how Dan can wiggle out of this. He's the one that picked July 28th or 29th through his lawyer. So you almost have to respond. You almost have to do this. The question now will become whether this is an actual public hearing and airs live like Roger Goodell's testimony did, or whether this will be under a closed circuit video feed from Israel, which is where his lawyer basically said he would be, and we'll only get a partial transcript or a full transcript.
Yeah, I'm just sure that all the players and the coaches are very happy this is happening just as training camp gets underway.
Another really good point. Well, listen, I mean, can't make this stuff up. I didn't even think about that. My gosh, the owner chose training camp. He had months to deal with this. He chose the second day of training camp. Is it the second day? Let me guess. Is July 28th a Friday?
I believe it is a Friday. Yeah, I think the rookies report on the 26th. The 27th is the veterans. And then, the 28th is this. So,
It's actually a Thursday, but he chose the 28th or the 29th. They chose the 28th because classic Dan Snyder style would have been to have news dump Friday.
I mean, this could have been done. You know what I mean? So it is what it is.
That's crazy. All right. Coming up, thankfully, more football talk. David and I are putting together our pre-training camp 53-man roster. We did the offense on our last episode. Now the defense. That is coming up on Locked On Commanders. But first, guys, we tell you about our friends at betonline.net. They are your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including Major League Baseball and golf's fourth major this week. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And betonline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this year. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check out all of your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and, of course, golf, as we just mentioned. Head to the website today or use your mobile device and learn more about the trends and the action. There's some good Washington Commanders NFL Super Bowl props as well on BetOnline right now. Go there, check it out. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Dave. So level with me. Let's be honest with each other. We've all been in a situation at some point in our lives when we're a little tight on cash. Maybe you can only afford to put a few gallons of gas in your tank, especially these days. Or you've got another save the date card and you're wondering how you're going to afford a gift for that event. That's where Dave can help. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses come up. Now, Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Hindsight is 20/20 and you can't change the past. But what if you get a little help from your future self? Maybe you'd ask to borrow a little cash. Well, now you can do that with Dave. Dave is a banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees do apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Future you will thank you.
All right, thanks again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and or your first view of the day. Either way you consume Locked On Commanders, we appreciate and thank you. All right, David, let's get into it. We took a look at our camp projections, and obviously this again before the final cut down in I guess it'll be late August, early September, forget the exact date, right around Labor Day, somewhere in that range. But now we take a look again at our defensive pre-training camp projections, I guess we'll start here. We have to match up how many defensive players with how many offensive players that we took, right? Mine, I almost took an extra defensive, so I had to remember I need room for 3 specialists down to 50. And by the way, of course, you can check out that episode again on YouTube, on any major platform that you normally consume us. So I had to go with 24 on defense, and I went with 8 on the defensive line. I'll run down my 8, and then we'll get to yours, and then we'll do the rest of the positions. So I'm going to go with Chase Young on my active 53-man roster. I think the injury happened early enough where he's cleared for week 1. That's just a guess, obviously. Certainly can change. Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, rookie Federian Mathis, James Smith-Williams. I think Casey Toohill makes it. He was pretty good in spots last year as a rotational defensive end. And obviously, again, injuries and maybe a lack of reps early on for Chase as they ramp him up. And then Daniel Wise is a guy who, David, every time I see him, he pushes the pocket and he collapses and he puts pressure up the middle and he pushes people back. I want that guy, unless he has a major slip-off in training camp and in the preseason, on my roster. So I went with 8 defensive linemen: Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Fedarian Mathis, JSW, Casey Toohill, and Daniel Wise.
Yeah, so you've got 8. I've got 9. And Jonathan Allen did not make my list. I'm just kidding. Of course, Jonathan Allen is on the list. Montez Sweat.
Breaking news. David Harrison says Jonathan Allen cut by the Washington Commanders.
First player cut. Yep, absolutely no. Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, Chase Young, Deron Payne, Fedarian Mathis, just like you, just like everybody. Of course, they're making the roster. Casey Toohill, for all the reasons you said. James Smith-Williams, again, for all the reasons you said. I also have Daniel White. So we have the same 8 players. It's just this 9th player. I added Shaka Toney, and I look at this team, and really the reason I add him is just because where is your strength going to be, right? Like, where do you expect your strength to come from? We kind of already touched on this a little bit pre-recording. Linebacker is a little bit of a tricky, category here. We'll get to that here in a minute. So I was like, you know what? If I can't add a whole lot of linebackers, I'm going to at least add some more defensive linemen so that maybe we keep guys fresher. Maybe we rotate, give teams different looks. Maybe we go the speed front. We get all small, like maybe we see Chase Young play over a guard or something like that when we go to like a smaller speed package or something crazy that like Todd Bowles would do down in Tampa Bay. Who knows? But whatever it is, Shaka Toney, kind of the guy that I kind of add in there some potential. We've seen some flashes here and there. He was the name left behind that I kind of like, so I added him as my 9th D lineman.
I had to leave him off because I like Shaka Toney. I think he flashed in some spurts, especially on 3rd down last year, where they really struggled, as we all know. I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't find a way to get Shaka Toney, even if it meant, taking like 2 linebackers. Yeah. I came pretty close. Hopefully I'll just say this. Hopefully I'm wrong. And hopefully Shaka Toney is on the initial chart. And that means hopefully you're right. So it was not because I do not like Shaka Toney. It was simply a numbers game. So sorry to the Toney family. I apologize.
But that's indicative of some of these decisions that this coaching staff and obviously, the front office is going to have to make. Like, they're as much as people are down about the Washington Commanders, there are some talented spots and there are some deeper spots on this roster, and D-line is definitely one of them. For obvious reasons up front with the first round picks, Fedarian Mathis, a 2nd round pick, but you've also got some deeper guys that are also very talented.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, moving on to the linebackers. David, I went with Jamin Davis, David Mayo, hold the mustard, Cole Holcomb, Khaleke Hudson, and the all-powerful veteran signing. When that veteran signing happens, I don't know. Could it happen a week from today, right before camp? Could it happen a week into camp? Could it happen 3 weeks into camp? I don't know. Could it happen at the 53-man cut down? Possible. Wide open. I don't know who that name is. There's a bunch of names out there. I don't think they go Dante Hightower, but maybe an Anthony Barr or somebody like that is hanging around looking for a job, drops their price, drops their demands. I just don't see, with all the undrafted kids that they've had in the OTA period, anybody that really, really, really jumped out at me that can't get through on the practice squad. And I don't see more than 4 NFL players, Hudson, Holcomb, Mayo, and Jamin Davis, on the 53-man to open up. So I might even be tempted to go with 4, and that might be the way I adjust and get Shaka Toney on the next time we do this. But for right now, I'll go with 5 and just go fill in the blank veteran signing on the 5th.
Yeah, I mean, look, so TBD, player to be determined, but 5 linebackers coming in on the initial roster. I've got 4, and that's kind of what I mentioned with Shaka Toney, is I sacrificed what could be a linebacker spot, and I went with 4 linebackers. I went with Cole Holcomb, Jamin Davis, David Mayo, and Khaleke Hudson as expected. And basically the way I looked at this is you have 2 starting linebackers and you have 2 backups. Like this isn't, I know that the role is 4-3, but with the rise of the Buffalo nickel and even, going into sub packages and all that stuff, I kind of look at this Washington defense and I almost think they really only need two linebackers. So if you only need two linebackers, you really only need, quote unquote, two depth guys, unless somebody really comes out and forces the team to keep them on the roster. And Ron Rivera did mention during the OTAs and the minicamp that there are some young linebackers on the roster currently that he likes, and they're hoping to keep one or two of them. Bryce Notree, number 59 in your programs, number 1 in your heart, Southern Illinois undrafted free agent, is a guy that I'm going to say is flashed, right? And I put that in air quotes on YouTube because he's running with the 3s, getting some action with the 2s. He's not running with the 1s. There's no pads, all this other stuff, right? So obviously you got to see him with pads, but he's kind of the guy that if I buy into Ron loves 1 or 2 of these young guys, I think number 59 for me is the guy that I would pick out of that group to say that maybe he loves them. If they keep 5 linebackers, maybe he makes the roster, and obviously is a more of a special teams contributor, but still on the roster.
I think that's a good long shot pick if you're looking for either that 5th guy, as I had, and I put a veteran. I think that's a good long shot pick indeed. All right, coming up next, we'll wrap it up with our corners and our safeties, 53-man projection style right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast. But first, guys, we tell you about our friends at Rock Auto and rockauto.com. We tell you about them all the time. You don't have to go anywhere to be a part of the Rock Auto family. Well, with the exception to your phone or your laptop and maybe a couch or a kitchen table or wherever you want to hang out in your home. Maybe you have a swing in your backyard and you want to swing back and forth as you order a fuel pump from, again, your phone or your tablet or your computer. Why? Because you don't have to go to the auto part superstore in your town or your neighborhood. You don't have to get the prices jacked up on you like they will because you're not their buddy, the mechanic who buys in bulk and buys every day and brings them coffee and bagels every morning as a nice thing to do so that he gets his parts at a much lower cost. Nope. You are going to get the best prices, the best service, the best availability, whatever you need, foreign or domestic, new or old, major or minor, at rockauto.com. They have brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet from rockauto.com. When you go to rockauto.com right now, you see all the parts available for your car or truck, right locked on in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com.
All right, closing out today's episode of the Locked On Commanders podcast, and we're doing so by closing out our 53-man roster projections. And look, just before we get there, the specialists, we got it. It's Joey Sly, Tressway, Cameron Cheeseman. Those are your specialists. Those are your 3 roster spots there. So 50 spots to fill. We've got DBs coming up, starting with the cornerback group, Chris. And for me, I've got this team keeping 5 cornerbacks. And again, if I'm going to go 9 D linemen, I got to give up somewhere. Gave up 1 on the linebackers compared to yours. So we'll see what you do. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you have a backup long snapper that makes the active roster that you want to surprise us with. My 5 guys: Kendall Fuller, William Jackson III, Benjamin St-Juste, Danny Johnson, and rookie Christian Holmes. I don't feel like there's a whole lot of surprises there. I feel like that's pretty much kind of what everybody expects to happen coming to the season. Maybe another name added, depending on how many you have. You're muted.
I went with 5 cornerbacks as well, David. Again, you just got to make decisions along the line. Like you, William Jackson III, Kendall Fuller, Benjamin St-Juste, Danny Johnson, and Christian Holmes, the rookie corner, the 7th round pick. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if this team somewhere along the lines picks up another veteran corner, but where that pinch would be, that I don't know. Maybe at safety, we'll get to that. So I went with those 5 guys. I feel pretty good about that group. Danny Johnson played better in the slot last year than maybe some people realize, but yet Benjamin St-Juste seems to be like the thing that they're in love with right now. So I assume BSJ will be the starter at the slot, but I can't say absolutely for certain because they might also need him outside if something happens to WJ3 or Kendall Fuller in training camp. And as far as safeties, David, I went with 5 again. And one is really more of just a special teamer, but he can play safety, he can play corner in a pinch, and that's Troy Apkey, which I know Washington Commanders fans don't like, but I mean, I put him on there because of special teams. Remember, this team does not have DeShazer Everett anymore after what happened late last regular season. Cam Curl, Bobby McCain, Percy Butler, the 4th-round rookie, and Defoe, Derek Forrest are the 4 other safeties that I have. And again, Apkey, primarily special teams, can play safety, can play corner in an absolute pinch.
Yeah, I've got 5 safeties as well. I think the math worked out there that we had to basically go there. And I've, 4 of them are the same: Cameron Curl, Bobby McCain, Derek Forrest, Percy Butler. Derek Forrest looking like your Buffalo nickel. I mean, it's a long way to being decided, but honestly, we see him run with the ones there kind of playing down there in that Landon Collins role. He looks pretty good early on. Looks like he understands the role. He's reading things properly, and that's step number 1. If you can't read the field properly from that position, I don't care how well your athletics are. Where we differ, and I did bounce between Apkey and the guy that I picked, I think Percy Butler maybe comes in. There was some excitement about him and his gunner ability and all these things. Maybe he can come in and kind of contribute enough. He may not be the ace that we've seen before, but he might be able to do enough to go ahead and warrant the team moving on and bringing in kind of a better, in my opinion, a better cover guy, a better guy for the secondary in Jeremy Reeves. And I know that he had a little bit of a hiccup there, right? Running into De'Ami Brown, not intentional, not malicious in any way, shape, or form. But once we got past that part, right? I talked to his position coach before we left from the minicamp, Chris. And once we get past the negativity and obviously the fine and everything that came after it, Jeremy Reeves, he says, is someone who's come in with a great understanding of the defense, playing faster. That's actually part of what led to that whole situation is, in reality, look, if that's in a game, Jeremy Reeves made an amazing play and closed very quickly on a route that he really shouldn't have even been involved with, but because of his eyes, because of his instincts, made a really great defensive play. The problem is there's no pads, it's non-contact, so you can't do that to the guy. And he's your teammate, by the way. But again, Jeremy, no malicious intent there, obviously. Felt really bad for doing it, but I think it's indicative of how much he's grown. And I think that, again, these are some of these decisions when it comes down to it. Can we live on special teams without Apkey, but can we improve on defense with Reeves? And I think if Reeves can show all of that, then he keeps Apkey off the roster, which makes a lot of people happy, which is kind of weird because Apkey is the guy who's out there grinding for his dreams and stuff. So I kind of don't like celebrating a guy losing out on their dream, but it is what it is.
No, I think that's a really good point. I thought about Reeves too. I just wonder if Apkey, the better special teams player, at least in my gut feel, when you're losing DeShazer Everett already, we know that. Can you afford to lose DeShazer Everett and Apkey? And I do think that will be a big question when they come to cut down the 53, when they settle it all in the end. All right, good stuff there. If you want to check out the offense, that was in our previous episode. Of course, it's still up. Just go to the previous to this episode on either YouTube or any other major platform, Audacy, Spotify, you got it. And you can get our offense. I'll try and post them all at LO Commanders as well. Not only the links to the episodes, but also the actual 53-man rosters. We'll get that up for you as quickly as we can. All right. We want to thank you again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and your first view of the day. Come on back for the next episode. David and I will have more content. We will see where this Dan Snyder situation goes. Stay tuned for all of that and more. Now make your second listen the Locked On NFL podcast. The national NFL experts and insiders keep fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from around the league, because an offseason doesn't equal a break in the action. Follow Locked On NFL on the Audacy app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hop in on the voicemail, 301-615-3577, 301-615-3577, or Locked On Washington Commanders at gmail.com. That's going to do it for us today, Commanders fans. Thanks for joining us. Again, we're free and available on all platforms. For David Harrison covering the Washington Commanders, for SI.com's Fan Nation, I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst Show. On the Team 980, we'll be back. The Locked On Commanders podcast.